It had all started with a collective of concerned mothers. Tipper Gore, wife of then Tennessee Senator and future Vice President Al Gore, was shocked to come across an explicit mention of masturbation in Darlin' Nikki, one of the songs in Prince's Purple Rain album, which she bought for her 11-year-old daughter, Karena. Susan Baker, wife of then White House Chief of Staff James Baker, was stunned by the type of lyrics her 7-year-old daughter, Mary, was singing from Madonna's Like a Virgin, then a #1 pop hit. And Pamela Hauer, spouse of powerful Washington, D.C. realtor Raymond Hauer, was startled to find out that her daughter had access to the same suggestive lyrics she heard from the speakers in her aerobics class. After subjecting herself to a few hours of MTV, obviously targeted toward a much younger crowd, and coming across more content she deemed disturbing, Gore decided to spearhead a crusade against what she condemned as explicit lyrics in popular music. She mobilized 2 of her friends, namely Baker and Hauer, as well as a third, Sally Nevius, wife of Proto-Council of the District of Columbia chairman John Nevius. Together, the 4 women were nicknamed Washington Wives. It's a somewhat derisive moniker, but apropos for a group willing to wield their political and financial connections via their respective spouses in favor of their cause. And that cause started with forming the nonprofit, tax-exempt organization named Parents Music Resource Center, or PMRC, on May 13, 1985. First course of action? Send a letter to the Recording Industry Association of America, aka the RIAA, a trade organization representing the lion's share of the United States recording industry, through its members that included major record labels and distributors. At most, the PMRC wanted the RIAA to stop releasing music with sexually explicit or violent lyrics. At the very least, the PMRC wanted the RIAA to adopt a rating system as a guide for parents purchasing music for their children, similar to what the movie industry had with the Motion Picture Association of America, or MPAA. Gore came up with guidelines of her own: X for sexual content, V for violent content, D\A for drug and alcohol-related content, and O for occultic themes. Gore's proposed ratings guide was put to use on a list of recent songs that the PMRC deemed the most objectionable. This list was befittingly named the Filthy 15. And as expected, Darlin' Nikki made that list. Most of the record companies balked at the PMRC suggestions, which was signed by the wives of over 20 Washington politicians and businessmen. But in August 1985, a few of them agreed to at least a label with the words "Parental Guidance Explicit Lyrics" printed on it to warn customers of questionable content. To put the label in place, the PMRC orchestrated a hearing before the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, scheduled for September 19, 1985. 3 musicians were invited to the hearing, which was gearing up to being the equivalent of an inquisition. The most vocal of the 3 seemed to be Dee Snider, the frontman of the heavy metal band Twisted Sister. That's understandable, since their signature song, "We're Not Gonna Take It," was among the Filthy 15.
My feelings are expressed for the most part by the August 8, 1985 letter to the Parents Music Resource Center from Mr. Stanley Gordikoff, President of the Recording Industry Association of America. The only part of this document I do not support is Mr. Gordikoff's unnecessary and unfortunate decision to agree to a so-called generic label on some selected records.
In addition to calling out Gore's misrepresentation of lyrics in his band's songs, Snider particularly resented the feeling that the hearing was unlawful and wasteful, since he deemed the RIAA agreeing earlier to a warning sticker sufficient, and hearings are held for putting together legislation proposals. So, Snider was not turning out to be the misogynistic and demon-worshipping meathead that the committee must have imagined him to be. The other 2 musicians were at least expected to be more favorable, since Tipper Gore's husband, Al, as part of the testifying senators, expressed his admiration for them. It mattered little. Frank Zappa, a musician who had produced works that spanned from rock and pop to jazz and orchestral, was equally as scathing as his heavy metal counterpart.
The PMRC proposal is an ill-conceived piece of nonsense which fails to deliver any real benefits to children, infringes the civil liberties of people who are not children, and promises to keep the courts busy for years dealing with the interpretational and enforcemental problems inherent in the proposal's design. The PMRC demands are the equivalent of treating dandruff by decapitation. No one has forced Mrs. Baker or Mrs. Gore to bring Prince or Sheena Easton into their homes. Thanks to the Constitution, they are free to buy other forms of music for their children.
But the real shocker was John Denver, the aw shucks American as apple pie charitable country and folk singer. More so than Snyder and Zappa, the committee expected him to be a supporting witness. But they must have either forgotten or disregarded the fact that Denver's signature song, the 1972 top 10 hit Rocky Mountain High, was almost banned by the Federal Communications Commission because it was believed that it promoted drug use, rather than the sense of peace one gets from being in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. It was eventually adopted as one of the state's official songs. So yeah, Denver wasn't down with this forum and its intentions.
May I be very clear that I am strongly opposed to censorship of any kind in our society or anywhere else in the world.
The three musicians in Capitol Hill may have differed in musical paths, but they were united in one thing: opposition to censorship, which threatened artists' First Amendment rights of freedom of speech and expression. But in the aftermath of that Senate hearing, artists now had to put a warning sticker on the works that their respective record labels deemed objectionable. It was generic, it was vague, and it was unstandardized. But for then, it would do.
The labels merely read Parental Advisory, Explicit Lyrics, but area teachers regard that as a major step toward reducing some of the influence the words are having on our youth.
Notably, there were no rap songs listed among the Filthy 15. In 1985, rap was perceived to be a fad, something that probably shouldn't even be considered as music. No rap song was in the top 40. Only Run DMC, the Fat Boys, and LL Cool J released albums that year that would be RIAA certified. And the subculture to which it was attached, hip-hop, had its largest exposure from films that felt faddish at best and exploitative at worst. 3 years later, that was beginning to change. There were a lot more rappers in the spotlight by 1988. Among the better-known ones was Ice-T, a transplant from the East Coast who had emerged as California's first solo hip-hop star with 2 well-received gold-certified albums, as well as a single, Colors, that served as the title track for a successful gang-themed film and became a Billboard Hot 100 hit. However, the major reason why Ice-T garnered so much attention was because of his lyrical content and themes, which covered the not-so-savory goings-on of hard-scrabbled South Central Los Angeles. Indeed, with songs like 6 in the Morning, he would be known as one of the progenitors of gangster rap. Left to Tipper Gore, Ice's work would have been eligible for 3 of her 4 proposed ratings. As far as we know, he wasn't an occultist. So, it wasn't surprising that Ice-T became the first rapper to have a generic PMRC sticker on his album, 1987's Rhyme Pays. He might have not liked it, but he played along. Rhyme Pays, his debut album, had a purple sticker with the shape of a bullet or condom. Power, his second album, released in 1988, was comparatively more generic, as though the artist was resigned to such monitoring for the rest of his career. Both stickers, peelable by the way, bore the words that the PMRC and the RIAA had agreed upon: explicit lyrics, parental advisory. But going into 1988, Ice-T was beginning to bristle. Fine, the sticker is allowed to warn parents of explicit material. Just don't prevent me from recording or performing the material itself. And that was beginning to happen to music performers in a certain part of the country, Columbus, Georgia. A concert headlined by the Beastie Boys at the height of their frat boy behavior following the smash success of their Licensed to Ill album greatly offended some of the parents in attendance. That was enough for the Columbus City Council to adopt a state statute nicknamed the Lewd Law in March 1987. The law prohibits certain acts in public places, including ones that simulate sexual intercourse. It didn't take long for a rapper to run afoul of the law. Only 3 months later, about a month before Ice-T's debut album was released, LL Cool J was arrested while performing at the Columbus Municipal Auditorium. His offense? He was humping a couch. Although Ice-T dissed LL several times in Power, he certainly wouldn't have wished that sort of outcome on anyone, including his rival, and himself. Ironically, he was the next MC up for some good old Columbus hospitality. Ice recalls what he went through around the time he was on the Dope Jam Tour, his first national tour, in Freedom of Speech.
Columbus, Georgia said they'd lock me up if I got on the stage of my show and said, so I thought for a minute and said no, I wasn't even gonna do a damn show.
Freedom of Speech became the main title track, more on that later, of his next album, and the cover art was enough to know what to expect. Darlene Ortiz, his common-law wife and the star of his first 2 album covers, is completely absent. Bummer. Oh well, back to the cover art. There's a Raiders cap-wearing person sporting a complexion light enough to suggest that he's Ice-T, with 2 pistols pointed at both sides of his head and the barrel of a rifle stuffed in his mouth. And then there's the literally chillin' bold letters hovering above him and the red font of the main album title right below him. Talk about being in a, cold world. And as though to stick it to Tipper Gore and the PMRC, the warning sticker is a lot more elaborate than the one on the immediately preceding album. X-rated. Parents strongly cautioned. Some material may be extra hype and inappropriate for squares and suckers. Sure, rock and roll, more specifically heavy metal, got the brunt of PMRC attacks. But rap was not exempt. Indeed, by 1989, certain acts, particularly 2 of them, had risen enough in prominence to make them targets. Fellow Los Angeles area residents, NWA, were arguably the hottest act in hip-hop, due to Straight Outta Compton finally catching fire that year, with fireballs of vulgarity that made Ice-T look like the Pope. Their track, F*** the Police, was incendiary enough for the FBI to notice, and law enforcement authorities threatened to arrest them if they dared to perform that song whenever on tour. Seemingly going further was 2 Live Crew, whose new album, The Sex-Drenched As Nasty As They Wanna Be, became their 2nd consecutive LP to possibly get record store owners prosecuted for obscenity violations. Apparently, a warning label wasn't enough. As a sort of elder statesman at the ripe hip-hop age of 31, Ice-T had his opinion on the whole situation. Being the godfather of reality rap that he is, trust him to attempt to fire back an admirable response. Released on October 10, 1989, the Iceberg, Freedom of Speech, Just Watch What You Say, opens, thinly enough, with a spoken word piece by fellow critic of the PMRC, Jello Biafra. Shut Up, Be Happy is the springboard for the entire album. Over a slow, creepy union of thunderclaps, electric guitars, and bells, courtesy of Black Sabbath's Black Sabbath, the former lead singer of the then-defunct Dead Kennedys has his vocals borrowed from Message from Our Sponsor, the opening track of his 1987 spoken word album, No More Cocoons. Biafra plays the role of town crier, announcing a new regime characterized by extreme censorship, where all constitutional rights have been suspended, and the #1 enemy of progress is questions. Remain calm under such circumstances? Yeah, right. The Iceberg ain't having that. Almost immediately, Ice-T barges in with a fast break of gloomy synthesizers in Lethal Weapon, with the hook carved out of Rakim's vocals in Microphone Fiend. Eventually, it's clear that he's not conforming to the prevalent attitude about rappers. No, the Lethal Weapon is not his jammy. It's his mind, the thing that's got more power than any gun in the world. It's just a matter of how you take care of it.
More bodies than John Gotti, the Lethal Weapon is slain. Just open any book, that's ammo to the brain.
And understandably, Tipper Gore is the main victim of the verbal bars his mind produces in Freedom of Speech.
Yo, Tip, what's the matter? You ain't getting no you bitching about rock and roll. That's censorship, dumb bitch. The Constitution say we all got a right to speak. Say what we want, Tip. Your argument is weak.
For all the charges Ice-T faced as being misogynist in some of his raps, Tipper Gore remains the only woman in his entire rapping career that he actually calls a bitch. This is a pure example of using the First Amendment wisely and effectively, which makes Ice-T less of an outright hypocrite than a commendable advocate. But true to form, Ice-T does not let the music industry, and by extension, his fellow Black Americans, off the hook. You Played Yourself sets a precedent in that Ice-T dismisses people that would later be known as studio gangsters. And This One's For Me reveals Ice-T's disappointment and anger over radio stations' reluctance to promote rap, and the relative lack of support from rappers for Public Enemy during the controversy swirling around Professor Griff's anti-Semitic comments. He even offers to sacrifice his recording career for the militant rap group, an exemplifier of an age where allegiance within the hip-hop community cut across geographical and ideological boundaries. Even LL Cool J, whom he had lambasted a year earlier for a lack of any social-political sense, gets a shout-out of support in the title track, referencing his arrest in Columbus, Georgia. And that makes the blistering verse he had delivered against LL in the previous year's The Syndicate more of a brotherly admonishment than a malicious diss. And of course, the vivid tales of gang life and its consequences are still in place. Peel Their Caps Back is a despondent first-person narrative of Ice-T out to avenge the slaying of one of his friends, only for him and 9 others to die as well. The stupidity of it all is encapsulated in words like the following.
My corpse stunk like a burnout rotten piece of meat. 10 brothers died in a stupid homicidal bin. Cause whenever someone dies, nobody wins.
Ice doesn't stop there. In The Hunted Child, with the noisy, siren-laden production undoubtedly influenced by Public Enemy's The Bomb Squad, Ice-T is once again the gang member protagonist who realizes that even though the system is set up against black youth like him, it's still not an excuse to succumb to it.
We're just brothers on the streets killing brothers. The system has geared to kill one another. Selling dope to poison each other. The plan of the man, word to the mother.
Preach on, Ice. Preach on. But that doesn't mean that Iceberg isn't going to have some fun. That's where the Iceberg title track comes in, an adopted moniker transformed into a lighter side of the album while reminding the listener of Ice-T's activism stance. The Iceberg, the first proper song in the album, is utterly hilarious as Ice-T tells one naughty tale after the other about members of his posse and their encounters with women. My Word is Bond is where Ice-T and his homeboys make outrageous claims and spin comically unbelievable yarns with Slick Rick's words from Lottie Dottie repeatedly scratched in as the hook to drive the point home. The most improbable of those claims and stories? Knocking out then undisputed heavyweight champion Mike Tyson. Sure, Ice-T and his Rhyme Syndicate homeboys were not the only hip-hoppers to think they could triumph over Iron Mike. But remember, this is 1989.
Hey, Leroy! Yeah? Did you see the fight? Did you see the fight? The football playing out the box.
Speaking of the Rhyme Syndicate, they are a much greater presence in freedom of speech. In addition to the aforementioned The Iceberg and My Word is Bond, you can hear them in the skit Black and Decker, placed in the middle of the album as though to blend attributes of the Iceberg and the freedom of speech activist by poking fun at censorship, right down to the simulation of ice drilling a hole into someone's skull. Even the absence of horrifying screams does not negate the disturbingly sick sounds the drilling produces. But the real coming out party is What You Wanna Do, a posse cut that involves several members and associates. Donald D. and Hen G, the guests on the previous album's The Syndicate, are back, alongside others such as Battle Ram legend himself, Todd T., Divine Styler, who would release his debut album, Word Power, only about 2 weeks after Ice-T's album, and future House of Pain frontman Everlast, who was the next man up with his own debut album, Forever Everlasting, in March 1990. What You Wanna Do is way too long at 9 minutes, especially considering that there's no wow factor in any of the performances, but it contributes to the party vibe respite of the album. Adding to the party vibe, somewhat, is the heavy metal drenched The Girl Try to Kill Me, foreshadowing Ice-T as a pioneer of the rap-core subgenre, with Body Count, his future band, waiting in the wings to unleash havoc in the 90s. Band members Beatmaster V and Ernie C provide the drums and guitar respectively. In the song, Ice recounts a humorous tale of sex with a married dominatrix. Sex is rarely this delightfully torturous. Trust the Iceberg to act, scared out of his pants. So there's a lot to like about this album. Biting social commentary, novelty raps, displays of braggadocio, and party cuts. But lyrical content and themes are one thing. The overall presentation is another. This is album number 3. By then, Ice-T was settled in his role as simple technician and extraordinary thematic specialist, just as he and Africa Islam were settled in their synthesizers, 909s, and funk and soul samples, save for the rock detour of The Girl Try to Kill Me. One of the few instances where everything comes together is the exhibitionist Hit the Deck, a rapid soundbed of ultra-short guitar licks, razor-sharp drums, and incredibly deft scratching from DJ Evil E as Ice-T speeds through the track without so much of a slight stumble.
Glowing like it did before, but even more. The room is lit, the raps are hardcore. Even cut the records like a cycle with a switchblade. You see a blur, that's the crossfade.
It's an admirable showcase from an MC that has never been known to be a rhyming virtuoso. Sometimes the concoction can be simple, such as the loop of Fred Wesley and the JB's same beat in The Iceberg that pins down Ice-T's flow, something that tends to go off the rails when he prioritizes content over technique. And that happens occasionally throughout Ice-T's third long player, most notably, and tragically, in the main title track. There's also the gurgling guitars in Freedom of Speech, the presence of James Brown's The Boss, which also showed up in Laura Finesse and DJ Mike Smooth's Bad Mother earlier that year in You Played Yourself, and The Honey Child, which clamps together a siren loop from Mantronic's King of the Beats and a drum break from the Isley Brothers' Get Into Something with an intermittent horn blast from Brass Construction's Movin' and a hook from Public Enemy's Bring the Noise. Again, Bomb Squad-esque. But overall, the production of Africa Islam and Ice-T was beginning to show its age in Freedom of Speech. The board work ranges from adequate to underwhelming, and in 1989, that wasn't cutting it. No one was expecting the duo to be Dr. Dre or Marley Marl or Prince Paul or Mark the 45 King or, in retrospect, the Beastie Boys. But when you have a guy who was growing in leaps and bounds topically and lyrically, Ice-T needed a major sonic boost. Without a hit single, and despite slower sales than Power, Freedom of Speech still managed to go gold, fueled by the First Amendment controversy surrounding it, as well as the continued ascendancy of gangsta rap. It was Ice-T's third consecutive album plaque from the RIAA, which was finalizing the industry classification standard with the PMRC. Just 3 months after Ice-T received his gold plaque, it finally happened.
Who are looking for help in monitoring the music their youngsters listen to now have assistance. Beginning in July, this label, which you're about to see, Parental Advisory, Explicit Lyrics, will appear on albums whose songs explicitly deal with sex, violence, suicide, and substance abuse. The label will appear on the lower right-hand corner at the
It sure wasn't Tipper's MPAA style rating system, but it was something that was going to be a lot more ubiquitous in the next several decades. The black and white Parental Advisory label became known as the Tipper sticker, and hip-hop's first recipient, and first in music overall, wasn't going to be Ice-T, as many might have expected. Rather, it was going to be Two Live Crew frontman Luke for his debut solo album, 1990's Banned in the USA. Talk about tongue-in-cheek title. It wasn't like the Iceberg was going to complain about being passed over for that honor. He was never comfortable with an advisory designation anyway, and besides, he already got the first one in hip-hop overall. Plus, it sure didn't stop Ice-T from hurling insults PMRC's way going into the 90s. But by then, the organization could go no further. Chalk it up to the increasing opposition from musicians unwilling to have their music rated at all, the failure of Tipper Gore to actually show concrete proof of the adverse effects of explicit content on impressionable children, and the fulfillment of their main goal with the Tipper sticker. By the mid-90s, at the height of gangsta rap, the PMRC was gone. It didn't even have the dignity of getting an exact end date.
Hey PMRC, you stupid f***ing. The sticker on the record is what makes it so gold. Can't you see? You alcoholic idiots. The more you try to suppress us, the larger we get.
But this is The Iceberg by Ice-T, and it says on there, Ice-T, parents strongly caution, rated X. Some material may be extra hype and inappropriate for school and suckers. Did you put this on here, Ice-T?
Yeah, well, we did that basically as a ploy at the PMRC because they seem to think that stickering an album is going to create some kind of loss in sales or something like that. So what I did was I overemphasized the sticker to let them realize how stupid it is, even stickering records, because you're not going to keep anything from any kids. I just came back from a tour of elementary school kids, and all of them had heard every record I ever made, so a sticker has absolutely nothing to do with a record.
Before I get to
Anyone wondering whether parental advisory stickers help or hurt sales can take a hard look at the biggest selling rap records within the first decade of the Tipper sticker's existence. Dr. Dre's The Chronic, Snoop Doggy Dogg's Doggy Style, Tupac's All Eyes on Me, Machiavelli's The Don Illuminati, The 7-Day Theory, also from Tupac, The Notorious B.I.G.'s Ready to Die, and Life After Death, Bone Thugs and Harmony's East 1999 Eternal and The Art of War, Jay-Z's Volume 2, Hard Knock Life, Master P's Ghetto D, DMX's It's Dark and Hell It's Hot, and There Was X. These are just a few examples. Not quite squeaky clean material, are they? Kudos to Ice-T using First Amendment advocacy as a major album linchpin. You don't see that in hip-hop very often, if ever. Unfortunately, the Iceberg, freedom of speech, just watch what you say, often gets overlooked, particularly within Ice-T's catalog. It's nowhere as revered as Power, it's not the epic-style magnum opus that OG Original Gangster is, and its relatively gloomy soundscape stands in contrast with the music of Rhyme Pays and Power. Plus, it doesn't regularly get mentioned among the socio-political standouts of that era, such as those from Public Enemy. Ultimately, though, this might be Ice-T's most well-rounded LP, and it's one of his best ones overall. Production issues and some rhyming sloppiness aside, the Iceberg, freedom of speech, just watch what you say, really should be a little more acclaimed or better remembered for the landmark that it is. A reality rap document buttressed with constitutional commentary. Not a lot of MCs had the brains of Ice-T. The mind is truly a powerful weapon. Thanks for watching. For those new here, welcome to Rap Perspective. For the Rappleheads, I greatly appreciate your support. Don't forget to like, comment on, and share this video, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. And I encourage everyone to watch, like, comment on, and share other videos on here. See you in the next video.